Hello everybody and welcome back to a long overdue episode of Boyographic, the show in which I, Matt the Gameboy, will talk you through the highs and lows of the Gameboy library, one cart at a time. This week we are going to be looking at an RPG of sorts for once. It's Rolan's Curse. It's incredibly hard to deny the influence the original Legend of Zelda had on the world of gaming. It was an adventure game set in a luscious open world, filled with interesting puzzles, memorable enemies, and an incredible soundtrack. It naturally captured the hearts and minds of an entire generation of gamers, and in doing so, sold like hotcakes. It created a market for a wealth of Zelda-like action RPGs that would become revered gaming series in their own right, such as the Ys games and the Mana series. However, despite the success of The Legend of Zelda on the NES, it wouldn't be until 1993 that we saw the release of a real handheld entry into the Zelda franchise in Link's Awakening, meaning of course that there was an almost 4-year block where the business-minded publisher could attempt to steal Nintendo's thunder and put out a quality action RPG on Nintendo's own handheld system, the Game Boy. American Sammy was one of the first publishers to try such a gambit, and the resulting game was called Rolan's Curse. The game's developers, Nippon Microcomputer Kaihatsu, naturally shortened to NMK, were actually more known for shooters than action RPGs, with their only foray into the fantasy-themed action game being 1988's Legend of the Makai, which is more of Zelda 2 than the original title, and the comparison ends at the fact that it's just a side-scroller. But make a Zelda-like experience they did, and they did a pretty damn good job of it considering the hardware limitations. Released in 1990, NMK's game tells the story of the Kingdom of Rolan, a world once terrorized by the evil King Barrios, who was sealed away and the world now is at peace. Naturally, this all went out the window, and it's now down to you, oh unnamed protagonist, to defeat him once and for all. Armed with a sword, you must slash your way through 3 levels filled with monsters, having conversations that feel like they were made to be memes with the townsfolk, and ultimately beating a boss to get you one step closer to Barrios. Levels, I hear you cry, in a Zelda game? Yes, dear viewers. How this game divided its open world to presumably get around the hardware limitations is by making each chunk of the game into a level. It's helpful in the sense that the game won't see you backtrack into previous areas, but it does have the downside of making the game seem incredibly short when you say the words 3 levels out loud. The how long to beat page for this game gives the game a supposed 1.5 hours of gameplay, which for me seems a little low. I'd put it probably towards the 3 to 4 hour mark without an FAQ, but I know compared to Link's Awakening, this seems perhaps a little short for your average gamer. The game's main focus is its combat, with a lot of the enemies having based around very simple patterns that shouldn't give you too much trouble to memorise. Sprites have a nice chunky super deformed look that I absolutely adore in Game Boy games, so while the game isn't a graphical powerhouse on the DMG, it's pretty easy on the eyes. With 19 unique enemies dotted around the world, repetition is kept to a bare minimum and adds to the feeling of progression that a level-based game implies. Fighting these enemies is primarily done with your hero's trusty sword by pressing the B button. However, hidden in the treasure chest throughout the world is also a fire wand that allows you to keep your distance from enemies at the cost of slightly nerfed damage. I, however, honestly recommend, if you're going to play through Rolan's Curse, to grab one and stick with it, as generally makes killing some of the more bastardly enemies a little bit easier, and hey, there's treasure chests with swords dotted around if you want to switch back. But it's not just the weapons that you can pick up in these chests, but hearts and strength clubs to increase your stats. The hearts, in the Zelda tradition, will permanently add 1 extra health to your hero, while the gloves improve your base strength. Also in these chests you can find a variety of items that can be used by pressing the A button. There's a potion of life that refills your health, and a shield to reflect projectiles. There's also some items such as a magical axe that can allow you to traverse the world easier by chopping down trees and destroying boulders, and a chameleon ring that allows you to morph into a piece of environment and bypass enemies. There's also a power crystal that does an AoE attack on screen. Killing enemies is also to the player's benefit. Defeating foes has the option of certain enemies dropping a small potion that can refill 2 hearts, an item called a Merlin's Cape that turns you invisible for a short time, and finally some chainmail, an item that adds an extra half heart of health to your hero until the end of the level, essentially allowing you to pick a farm spot thanks to certain enemies respawning and slowly build up max health before you fight a boss. Ka-ching! Speaking of bosses, the game has 4 of them, one at the end of each level, with the final face-off against Barrius coming on its own 4th mini-stage. All of their patterns are pretty straightforward to memorise, with only the big bad Barrius offering any real challenge if the player hasn't collected enough hearts. As well, he hits pretty hard. Well, to be honest, the other bosses probably won't even see you breaking a sweat. Their sprites aren't really the best I've seen on a Game Boy title, but I'm willing to let this pass as they don't really tear the screen like other Game Boy bosses are known to do. This brings me to perhaps the most annoying thing about Rolan's Curse, however, and this is the inability to turn without walking. To turn left or right, your hero will always take a step forward. This is fine in most instances, as enemies will generally follow strict patterns and you can avoid them. However, as the game goes on, you can see yourself trying to avoid projectiles and stepping into them, or trying to deal damage with an enemy either side of you and walking directly into them. It's a little niggle, but one that can get you killed if you're not careful. But for my money, other than arguably the game's length, it's probably the only problem I have with this game. Between these bosses and some areas, you'll find small towns that generally contain a chest of a potion of life and a lot of static villagers. While unfortunately you cannot enter their homes and smash pots for rupees, you can talk to them and see the worst case of localization team thinking to themselves, "We need to say something cool to the kids," that I've ever seen on Boyographic. Phrases like, "A hammer is a handy tool," and "You can see the ocean," are arguably even better than "You are holding clock" in my eyes. The game also has a pretty decent music on it, which I find myself humming long after putting the console down. But perhaps the greatest thing about Rolan's Curse is its multiplayer. Yes, this game actually has multiplayer, allowing you to get 2 people in the same world at once, battling monsters via link cable. While I wasn't able to try this out myself, my good friend Vince over at Massive Damage has. Go check out his video, which is unfortunately in Dutch, but if you want to see more, you can do it there. While you're there, be sure to give him a little nudge to make more videos, because I miss them. All in all, despite some minor shortcomings, Rolan's Curse is a lot of fun if you like action RPGs. You'll find nothing incredibly new here, but what is on offer is of a very high standard. The biggest disappointment here is there's simply not more of it, and that's always a massive letdown. The game also lacks a battery save, but you can put the game down and return to the world of Rolan thanks to its pretty robust password system, viewable at any time by pressing the start button. I hear the game's sequel, Rolan's Curse 2, has a lot of improvements over this game which I look forward to seeing, but until then I may just take Rolan's Curse for a spin again. Its pacing, sprites and music can make for a wonderful palate cleanser if you can find the game cheap, but as it is an action RPG, it's not that easy to get the cart for pittance. Pick it up and play it if you can, as I truly believe the only curse this game suffers from is being largely forgotten by the Game Boy connoisseur. And that brings us to the end of another episode of Boyographic, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed. Sorry about the delay, but this is actually the second video I'm filming, so another one should be out next Sunday. Huzzah! So if you would like to see more Boyographics and keep in touch with the channel and see what's going on, you can do so by hitting that subscribe button and sharing the channel with people you think might be interested in it, because hey, that's how it gets around and it encourages me to make more videos. You can also check out the pre-existing Boyographic video if this is your first by clicking on the link that says Boyographic, and you can see me root through the highs and lows of the Game Boy library one cart at a time, so you lovely people don't have to waste your money on garbage. You can also check out some Boy Curious videos where I look at bootlegs and oddities for the system, as well as looking at our All the Glory videos, where I play through a game, cut out all of the deaths, leaving you with none of the faff, but all of the glory. Until next week, though, Game Boys and Girls, you can find me on Twitter at Gameboy and also on Facebook and Instagram at the same place. Okay, cool. Well, that's it from me. Leave a comment down below if you liked it or if you like Rolan's Curse, and I will do my best to get back to you. But until next week, Game Boys and Girls, it's goodbye from me and game on.